The silence in Marcus Hale's house was not the peaceful kind. It was the heavy, disciplined silence of a vacuum, a space where noise dared not enter because there was no one left to make it. At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, the sunlight in San Diego cut through the blinds of Marcus's living room like laser grids. Dust motes danced in the beams, settling on the polished mahogany of the side tables. Everything was in its place. The coasters were stacked. The remote controls were aligned parallel to the edge of the coffee table. The floor, a dark oak, shone with a cleanliness that bordered on obsessive. Marcus stood in his garage, the only place where he allowed a mess, though even that was organized chaos. He was 42 years old, but his shoulders carried the weight of a man twice his age. His hands, scarred and calloused from years of gripping rifles, ropes, and the cold steel of ship railings, were now sanding a piece of cherry wood. He was restoring an old rocking chair. It was something to do. It was something to keep the memories at bay. Since Elena died 2 years ago, Marcus had treated his life like a military operation. Mission: raise Noah. Strategy: discipline. Routine: safety. Execution: flawless. Or so he thought. He blew the sawdust off the wood, the fine powder clouding the air. He checked his watch. It was a rugged, black tactical watch that had survived deployments in environments that would kill a normal man. 2:14 p.m. Noah was in his last period of class at St. Jude's Academy, a prestigious private school Marcus paid for with his pension, and the disability checks he tried not to think about. It was the best school in the city. Safe, secure, expensive. Marcus picked up a rag to stain the wood, his movements rhythmic. Sand, wipe, stain, repeat. The phone on the workbench buzzed. It wasn't a ringtone. Marcus kept his phone on vibrate. The harsh buzzing against the wooden table sounded like an angry hornet. He frowned. He didn't get calls at 2:15 p.m. His few friends knew he was working. The school had a specific protocol for emails. He wiped his hands on his apron and picked up the device. Unknown number. Usually he would let it go to voicemail. Spam, telemarketers, or the VA checking in on his adjustment. But something, perhaps that finely tuned instinct that had saved his life in the mountains of Afghanistan, made his thumb hover over the green icon. The hair on the back of his neck stood up. It was a physical sensation, a spidey sense developed over 2 decades of high-threat environments. He slid the icon. "Hale speaking," he said, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that demanded brevity. For a second, there was only the sound of heavy breathing on the other end. Static. Background noise that sounded like the echo of a long hallway. "Hello?" Marcus snapped, his patience thinning. "Sir, Mr. Hale." The voice was female, young and trembling. It wasn't the polished, professional tone of the school secretary, Mrs. Gable. It wasn't the confident voice of the principal. This voice sounded terrified. It sounded like someone who was holding back tears, or perhaps holding back panic. "Who is this?" Marcus asked, his grip on the phone tightening. He stopped sanding. The garage went deadly silent. "My name is Sophia," the voice stammered. I work at the school, in maintenance. Sir, please don't hang up." "I'm listening," Marcus said. His heart rate, usually a resting 50 beats per minute, kicked up to 70. "Is this about Noah?" There was a pause, a hesitation that felt like an eternity. "Sir, your son fainted," Sophia said, the words rushing out in a breathless tumble. "He collapsed in the hallway. I'm with him now. He's waking up, but he's very pale, and his hands are cold." The world stopped. For Marcus, the garage vanished. The smell of sawdust and varnish was replaced by the phantom scent of antiseptic and fear. Fainted. Noah was 8. Healthy. He ate his vegetables. He slept 9 hours a night. He didn't just faint. "Where is the nurse?" Marcus asked, his voice shifting into command mode. Cold. Precise. "Where is the administration?" "The nurse isn't in her office today," Sophia whispered, her voice shaking even more. "It's Tuesday. She rotates schools, and the teachers. They are calling an ambulance now, I think. But everyone is just standing around debating protocol." Noah looked so scared, sir. I couldn't leave him on the floor. A surge of red-hot anger flooded Marcus's chest, instantly followed by the ice-cold clarity of a soldier entering a combat zone. Is he breathing effectively? Marcus demanded. Yes. Yes, he is breathing, but his pulse is fast. I checked it like I saw in a movie once. It's fluttering. Stay with him, Marcus ordered. He was already moving. He tore the apron off his neck and threw it onto the workbench. He grabbed his keys. Sophia, listen to me. Do not leave his side. Do not let them move him until the paramedics arrive unless there is immediate danger. Talk to him. Tell him Dad is coming. Can you do that? Yes. Sophia's voice was barely audible. I'm holding his hand, sir. I won't let go. I'm coming. Marcus hung up. He didn't run to the car. He moved with lethal efficiency. Every step was calculated. Wallet, keys, phone, lock the door. As he slid into the driver's seat of his black Ford F-150, his mind was no longer in the suburbs of San Diego. He was operating on a different frequency. The golden hour, the critical time immediately following a traumatic injury, was a concept burned into his brain. While a faint wasn't a gunshot wound, the physiological response was similar. Helplessness. He started the engine, the roar of the V8 breaking the afternoon calm. As he backed out of the driveway, his knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. He had promised Elena, on her deathbed, holding her frail hand while the machines beeped their rhythmic countdown, he had sworn an oath more sacred than the one he took for his country. I will protect him. I will be enough for him. And now, his son was lying on a cold tile floor, surrounded by strangers who were debating protocol, while a cleaning girl named Sophia was the only lifeline he had. Marcus slammed the truck into drive and peeled out of the neighborhood. The veteran was gone. The father was at war. 20 minutes earlier, St. Jude's Academy was a fortress of glass and brick, designed to look more like a university than an elementary school. It smelled of floor wax and old books, a scent that usually implied safety and higher learning. But to Sophia Reyes, it smelled like ammonia and invisibility. Sophia was 22 years old, though her eyes held the exhaustion of someone much older. She wore the gray uniform of the custodial staff, a baggy tunic and trousers that seemed designed to erase the shape of the person beneath them. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight, practical bun, and her hands were gloved in blue latex. To the students and faculty of St. Jude's, Sophia was part of the architecture. She was a self-moving cleaning instrument. Teachers walked past her without nodding. Students dropped wrappers on the floor 10 feet from where she was sweeping, expecting the magic broom to whisk it away. She didn't mind the work. It paid for her night classes at the community college and put food on the table for her younger sister. But she minded the silence, the feeling that she didn't exist. That Tuesday afternoon, the hallway of the East Wing was scorching. The air conditioning in this section of the building had been malfunctioning for a week, a detail the administration deemed low priority because only the library and the maintenance closets were located here. Sophia was pushing her yellow cart, restocking the paper towels in the bathrooms, when she saw him, Noah Hale. She knew his name because he was one of the few children who actually looked at her. Most kids looked through her, but Noah, with his messy brown hair and those sad, intelligent eyes, would always offer a shy smile when he passed her in the cafeteria. Once he had even picked up a dropped sponge and handed it back to her, whispering a polite thank you that had stunned her into silence. Today, Noah wasn't smiling. He was walking slowly, dragging his backpack as if it contained rocks. He was hugging the wall, his face a sheet of paper white. He looked small, too small for the large blazer of the school uniform. Sophia stopped her cart. She lowered the mop handle she was holding. "Hey," she called out softly, mindful of the rule. Staff should minimize interaction with students during class transitions. "Are you okay?" Noah stopped. He swayed on his feet. He looked at her, his eyes unfocused, glassy. I feel dizzy," he mumbled. His voice was thick, sluggish. At that moment, the bell rang. Doors burst open down the hall. A flood of older students, 5th and 6th graders, poured out, laughing, shouting, checking their phones. They surged around Noah like a river around a stone. A teacher, Mr. Henderson, a tall man who always wore bow ties, marched past, his eyes fixed on a stack of papers in his hand. "Move along, folks. Keep the flow moving," Henderson barked over the noise. Nobody looked at the small boy leaning against the lockers. It was the bystander effect in real time. In a crowd, everyone assumes someone else will help, or they simply don't see the distress because it doesn't fit the pattern of normal. Sophia felt a knot of panic in her stomach. She shouldn't interfere. If she stopped a student, she could get reported for delaying them. But Noah's knees buckled. It happened in slow motion. One moment he was upright. The next he was sliding down the metal locker, his head lolling to the side. "Noah!" Sophia screamed. She abandoned her cart. She didn't care about the protocol. She didn't care about the wet floor sign she hadn't put up yet. She sprinted the 10 feet and slid onto her knees beside him just as he hit the linoleum. The hallway noise seemed to dampen. The students nearby stopped, forming a circle, their laughter turning into hushed whispers. Phones came out. They were filming. Of course, they were filming. "Back up! Give him air!" Sophia yelled, her voice cracking with a ferocity she didn't know she possessed. She pulled Noah's heavy backpack off his shoulders. She loosened his tie. His skin was clammy, cold sweat beading on his forehead despite the heat of the hallway. "Noah, can you hear me?" She tapped his shoulder. No response. Mr. Henderson finally noticed the commotion. He pushed through the circle of students. "What is going on here? Why is the janitor on the floor with a student?" "He fainted," Sophia said, looking up at the teacher. "He needs the nurse. Now." "The nurse is at the sister school today," Henderson said, looking flustered. He didn't kneel. He pulled out his phone. "I'll call the main office. They'll page the principal." "Call 911, Sophia snapped. "Now, let's not be dramatic," Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. "It's probably just dehydration. We need to follow the liability protocol. We can't just call an ambulance without parental consent unless it's a critical emergency." "He is unconscious," Sophia cried. She put her fingers on Noah's neck. She felt the pulse, rapid, weak, fluttering like a trapped bird. She ignored the teacher. She looked at Noah's backpack. Attached to the zipper was a laminated tag. "Emergency contact, Marcus Hale, father." It had a phone number. This was a violation of privacy. She was unauthorized to access student personal information. If she made this call, she could be fired for overstepping boundaries. St. Jude's prized discretion above all else. Calling a parent directly, bypassing the administration, was a cardinal sin. Sophia looked at Noah's pale face. She thought of her own little brother at home. If this were him, she wouldn't care about rules. She would want to know. She pulled out her cheap, cracked smartphone from her pocket. Her hands were shaking so hard she mistyped the number twice. "Ms. Reyes, put that away," Henderson warned, realizing what she was doing. "The office is handling this. Do not contact the parent. That is the headmaster's job." Sophia hit the call button. She looked Mr. Henderson dead in the eye, a spark of defiance igniting in her dark eyes. "He's not just a student," she said firmly. "He's a little boy." She put the phone to her ear and prayed the father would answer. The drive from Marcus's home to St. Jude's Academy usually took 25 minutes. Marcus intended to make it in 12. The Ford F-150 was a beast, and Marcus drove it with the precision of a tactical operator. He wasn't reckless. Recklessness got people killed. He was aggressive. He anticipated traffic flows using the shoulder when necessary, flashing his lights to clear the lane. His mind, however, was a dual processor. One part was focused on the road. Red light ahead, clear right, turning now. Gap in traffic, accelerate. The other part was trapped in a memory loop. He remembered the day Elena died, the feeling of helplessness, the doctors speaking in medical jargon that sounded like a foreign language, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, acute respiratory distress. He had been a Navy SEAL. He could dismantle a bomb underwater. He could snipe a target from a mile away in high wind. He could survive for weeks in the jungle with a knife and a canteen, but he couldn't force oxygen into his wife's lungs. That powerlessness was the only thing Marcus Hale feared, and now it was threatening to consume him again. Why did he faint? Marcus's mind raced through the possibilities. Dehydration? Possible. Skip breakfast? No. I watched him eat eggs. Head injury. Bullies. The thought of bullies made his grip on the steering wheel tighten until the leather creaked. Noah was sensitive. He was quiet. He liked to draw and read about marine biology. He wasn't a tough kid in the traditional sense, and Marcus had never forced him to be. He wanted Noah to retain the softness that Elena had. But softness was a liability in a world of wolves. Had he failed him? "Focus," Marcus growled aloud in the empty cab. "Assess the situation when you arrive. Secure the asset. Treat the problem." He saw the wrought iron gates of St. Jude's Academy approaching. The security guard, a retired cop named Old Man Miller, started to step out of his booth to wave Marcus down for a pass check. Marcus didn't slow down. He flashed his headlights and honked, 2 short blasts. Miller, recognizing the truck and seeing the speed, wisely stepped back and opened the gate remotely. He knew Marcus. He knew you didn't stand in front of a tank. Marcus parked the truck diagonally across 3 spaces in the faculty lot, right in front of the main entrance. He killed the engine and was out of the door before the pistons stopped firing. He didn't run like a civilian, flailing and panting. He ran with a high, ready posture, his chest up, head scanning, moving with explosive power. He burst through the double-glass doors of the main reception. The receptionist, a woman named Mrs. Gable who prized order above all else, stood up, startled. "Mr. Hale, we were just about to call. Where is he?" Marcus didn't shout, but his voice carried a shockwave that silenced the room. "East Wing, near the library," she stammered. "Mr. Hale, please, the principal is on his way. We have procedures." Marcus was already gone. He sprinted down the polished corridors. The school was a maze of trophies and lockers. He turned the corner into the East Wing and saw the scene. It was a tableau of chaos and stillness. A group of teachers was standing in a semicircle, looking anxious. The principal, Mr. Sterling, was there, gesturing with his hands, talking to a paramedic team that had, thank God, just arrived. But Marcus didn't look at them. His eyes locked onto the floor. There, sitting cross-legged on the cold tiles, was a young woman in a gray janitor's uniform. Her hair was coming loose from her bun. She was murmuring softly, stroking the hair of the small boy whose head rested in her lap. Noah. He was conscious now, but barely. His eyes were half open, looking up at the girl. He looked tiny, fragile. Marcus felt a physical blow to his chest, a mixture of relief and terror. He slowed his pace as he approached the circle. "Excuse me, Mr. Hale." Principal Sterling stepped in front of him, putting a hand up. "Let the professionals handle this. We had a minor incident, likely heat exhaustion. We are handling it internally." Marcus didn't stop. He didn't even look at Sterling. He simply walked through the space where the principal was standing, forcing the man to step aside or be trampled. He dropped to his knees beside the janitor and his son. The impact of his knees on the floor cracked like a gunshot. "Noah," Marcus whispered. The hardness in his face melted instantly. The boy's eyes shifted, a faint spark of recognition. "Dad?" Noah's voice was a dry, raspy whisper. "I fell." "I know, buddy. I've got you." Marcus placed a large hand on Noah's chest, feeling the heartbeat. It was fast, too fast. He looked up. For the first time he saw the girl, Sophia. She looked terrified. She pulled her hands back as if she had been caught doing something wrong. She scrambled to stand up, clutching her phone to her chest. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, looking at the principal who was glaring at her. I didn't want him to be alone." Marcus looked at the principal, then at the teachers who were standing 5 feet away, clean and detached. Then he looked at this girl, whose uniform was stained with dust from the floor, who had been the pillow for his son's head. He saw the fear in her eyes, not of the medical emergency, but of the consequences of caring. Marcus stood up, lifting Noah effortlessly into his arms as if the boy weighed nothing. He turned to the paramedics who were waiting with a stretcher. "Check him in the ambulance," Marcus commanded. "I'm riding with him." Then he turned to Sophia. The hallway went silent. Principal Sterling looked ready to fire her on the spot for the breach of protocol. Marcus looked her in the eye. "You called me?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Sophia whispered, looking at the floor. "I broke the rules. I'm sorry." Marcus shifted Noah's weight to one arm and extended his free hand toward the terrified cleaning girl. "Don't apologize," Marcus said, his voice ringing off the lockers, loud enough for every teacher and administrator to hear. "You were the only one here who acted like a human being." He didn't shake her hand. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder, a gesture of protection. "Thank you, Sophia." He turned and marched toward the exit, the paramedics scrambling to keep up. But as he walked away, carrying his world in his arms, Marcus knew one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't just heat exhaustion. The heat didn't make a healthy boy's heart flutter like a wounded bird. The battle had just begun. The ambulance was a vibrating box of noise and controlled chaos. To most, the wail of the siren is a sound of panic. To Marcus Hale, it was simply tactical noise, background interference that needed to be filtered out so he could focus on the objective. The objective was lying on the stretcher, wrapped in a thermal blanket, an oxygen mask covering his small, pale face. "Pulse is thready. BP is dropping. 90/60. The paramedic, a young man named Davis, called out to his partner driving up front. "ETA to St. Mary's?" 6 minutes out, the driver shouted back. Marcus sat on the narrow bench seat, his large frame cramped in the confined space. He held Noah's hand. It felt frighteningly light, like holding a sparrow. He wasn't looking at the paramedic. His eyes were locked on the cardiac monitor, watching the green line trace the erratic rhythm of his son's heart. Tachycardia. The word floated to the surface of his mind from his combat medic training. Fast heart rate. Why? "Talk to me," Marcus said. It wasn't a request. It was an order delivered with the calm intensity of a man who had led platoons through ambushes. "What are the vitals telling you? This isn't just heat exhaustion." Davis looked up, surprised by the father's composure. Usually parents were screaming or crying. This man sat like a statue made of granite and grief. "His blood sugar's through the roof, sir," Davis said, checking a glucometer. "The meter just reads high. That usually means over 600. And his breath. Do you smell that?" Marcus leaned in. Beneath the smell of sterile plastic and diesel fumes, there was a faint, sickly sweet scent coming from Noah, like rotting apples or nail polish remover. "Ketones," Marcus whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Exactly," Davis nodded, working quickly to start an IV line in Noah's thin arm. "We suspect diabetic ketoacidosis, DKA. It's a life-threatening complication of untreated type 1 diabetes. His body has no insulin, so it's burning fat for fuel, turning his blood acidic." Marcus felt the floor of the ambulance drop out from under him. "Diabetes. He's never been diagnosed," Marcus said, his voice straining to remain steady. "He had a physical 6 months ago. He was clean. Type 1 can come on fast in kids," Davis explained as he taped the IV down. "Weeks, sometimes days. But sir, for it to get this bad, to the point of collapse and shock, he must have been showing symptoms for a while. Extreme thirst, constant urination, weight loss, fatigue." The questions hung in the air, heavy and accusing. Marcus closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. The memories of the last 2 weeks replayed in his mind, but this time, he viewed them through a different lens. Monday morning, Noah asking for a second water bottle for school. Marcus had packed it but told him, "Don't drink it all at once, you'll be running to the bathroom all day." Wednesday night, Noah wetting the bed, something he hadn't done since he was 3. Marcus had stripped the sheets in silence, assuming it was stress or a regression due to missing his mother. He hadn't scolded him, but he hadn't asked why either. He just turned on the washing machine. Friday afternoon, Noah falling asleep on the couch at 5:00 p.m. Marcus had thought, "Good, he's tired from soccer practice, building character." He showed signs, Marcus admitted, his voice hollow. "I missed them." "It happens," Davis said, though his tone was professional, offering little comfort. "But usually schools catch this too. If a kid is asking to go to the bathroom 5 times a day or drinking from the fountain constantly, someone usually notices. Someone usually notices." The words ignited a cold fury in Marcus's gut. The image of the East Wing hallway flashed in his mind, the teachers standing around. Mr. Henderson checking his watch, Principal Sterling talking about liability. They saw him for 8 hours a day. They saw him struggling. And they did nothing. The ambulance lurched as it hit a pothole, then banked hard to the right. "Arriving at emergency!" the driver yelled. The back doors burst open, flooding the dark ambulance with harsh California sunlight. A team of doctors and nurses in blue scrubs was already waiting at the bay, like a pit crew ready for a race car. Male, 8 years old, suspected DKA, unconscious at the scene, GCS 13. Davis shouted the handover as they unloaded the stretcher. They rushed Noah inside. Marcus ran alongside the gurney, his hand never leaving the metal rail until they reached the double doors marked Trauma Room 1. Authorized personnel only. A nurse stepped in front of him, her face kind but firm. "Sir, you have to stay here. We need room to work." "That's my son," Marcus growled. "And we are going to save him," she said, looking him in the eye. "But you can't help him in there. You help him by letting us do our job. Go to the desk. Give them his history. That saves time. Time saves muscle. Go." Marcus stopped. The logic pierced through his emotional armor. She was right. He was a hindrance in the trauma room. He was an asset at the admin desk. He turned on his heel and walked toward the reception, his boots squeaking on the linoleum. Every step took him further from his son, but deeper into the war for his son's survival. The waiting room of St. Mary's Hospital was a purgatory of beige chairs and muted television screens. It smelled of vending machine coffee and anxiety. Marcus sat in the corner, his back to the wall, a habit he could never break. He had filled out the paperwork. Insurance, TRICARE, emergency contact, Marcus Hale. Mother. Deceased. An hour passed, then 2. The clock on the wall ticked with agonizing slowness. Tick, tick, tick. Each second was a reminder of his own failure. Finally, a doctor emerged through the swinging doors. She was a woman in her 50s with gray streaks in her hair and an air of no-nonsense competence. Dr. Eris Thorne. "Mr. Hale?" Marcus was on his feet instantly. "Report." Dr. Thorne blinked at the military terminology but didn't comment. She gestured for him to sit, but seeing he wouldn't, she stood with him. "Noah is stable," she said immediately. The breath that left Marcus's lungs felt like it had been held for 2 years. He nodded, his jaw clenched to keep his lip from trembling. "He is in the ICU," Dr. Thorne continued. "We have him on an insulin drip and we are replacing his fluids and electrolytes cautiously to avoid cerebral edema, brain swelling. He's waking up. He's asking for you." "Can I see him?" "In a moment. First, I need to understand the timeline." Dr. Thorne's eyes narrowed slightly behind her glasses. She wasn't just a doctor. She was an investigator of the human body. "Mr. Hale, Noah's dehydration was severe. His sodium levels were critically high. This didn't just happen because of the diabetes. He hasn't had fluid intake for a significant amount of time today. Did he go to school with water?" "Yes," Marcus said, his brow furrowing. "A 32-ounce bottle. I filled it myself this morning. We checked his backpack," Dr. Thorne said. "The bottle was full, untouched." Marcus froze. That doesn't make sense. If his sugar was high, he would have been dying of thirst. His body would be screaming for water. "Exactly," Dr. Thorne said. "Which means one of 2 things. Either he chose not to drink, or he was prevented from drinking." She let that sink in. "Furthermore," she continued, looking at her clipboard, "Noah was wearing a heavy blazer. He was overheated. When we catheterized him, his bladder was painfully full. He had been holding his urine for hours." "Hours, Mr. Hale. A diabetic child needs to urinate frequently. Holding it that long causes immense pain and accelerates the toxicity in his blood." Marcus's hands curled into fists at his sides. The knuckles turned white. The veins in his forearms bulged. "Are you telling me," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly low register, "that my son was sitting in class, dying of thirst, needing to use the bathroom, and he just didn't?" "I asked him briefly when he woke up," Dr. Thorne said softly. "He was confused, but he said he didn't want to lose a token. He said Mr. Henderson takes tokens if they leave the room. Mr. Henderson, the man with the bow tie, the man who had been worried about liability while Noah lay on the floor." "Thank you, doctor," Marcus said. The calm in his voice was now completely artificial. It was the calm of a missile silo before launch. "Take me to him." They walked to the ICU room. Noah looked small in the bed, wires and tubes connecting him to machines that beeped and hummed. His skin was still pale. but the gray, deathly pallor was gone. Marcus pulled a chair up to the bedside. He took Noah's hand. "Hey, sailor," Marcus whispered. Noah opened his eyes. They were groggy, but clear. "Dad? Am I in trouble?" The question broke Marcus's heart into 1,000 pieces. "Trouble? No. Why would you be in trouble?" "I didn't finish the day," Noah mumbled. "And I wet myself when I fell. Mr. Henderson said we have to have self-control. He said only babies can't hold it." Marcus leaned forward, resting his forehead against their joined hands. He closed his eyes, fighting back the sting of tears. A mixture of sorrow and rage swirled inside him, a volatile cocktail. "Noah, look at me." Marcus raised his head. "You are sick, buddy. You have something called diabetes. It's not your fault. It's nobody's fault. Your body just needs help processing sugar. But what happened today? Not drinking, not going to the bathroom. He said if I left during the lecture again, I'd lose my recess token," Noah whispered. "And if I lose 3 tokens, I can't go on the aquarium trip. I really wanted to see the sharks, Dad." Marcus stroked his son's hair. A child risking his health, enduring physical agony just to see sharks, just to follow the rules, just to not be a problem. "You're going to see the sharks, Noah, I promise," Marcus said. "Rest now. Dad has some work to do." "Did you see Sophia?" Noah asked suddenly, his eyes widening. "The lady from the hallway?" "Yeah, she stayed," Noah said, a faint smile touching his lips. "Everyone else walked away because I looked weird, but she sat on the floor. She told me stories about her little brother until I couldn't hear anymore." "Is she in trouble?" Mr. Henderson yelled at her. "No," Marcus said firmly. "She is not in trouble. She is a hero." Marcus stayed until Noah drifted back to sleep. Then he stood up. He checked his watch. 4:30 p.m. The school day was over, but the staff would still be there for after-school programs and administrative wrap-up. He took out his phone. He had one number to call before he went to war. He looked at the call log. Unknown number, the one Sophia had called from. He pressed dial. Sophia Reyes sat on a plastic crate in the back of the custodial supply closet, trying to stop her hands from shaking. The smell of bleach was overwhelming, usually a comfort, but today it made her nauseous. Her supervisor, a burly man named Carl who managed the contract cleaning service, was standing over her. "You know the rules, Sophia." Carl sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Strict non-interaction policy. We are ghosts. We clean, we fix, we vanish. You don't touch the students. You definitely don't call the parents." "He was dying, Carl," Sophia said, her voice trembling but defiant. "He wasn't moving." "That's for the school nurse to decide. Or the teachers," Carl argued. "Principal Sterling is furious. He says you undermined his authority and violated student privacy laws by accessing that backpack. He wants you off the rotation. He wants you gone." "Gone?" Sophia stood up. "I need this job. My sister—" I know, Carl waved a hand. "I'm trying to move you to the warehouse district. Night shift. But Sterling is threatening to sue the company if we don't make an example. He says you caused a panic." "I caused a panic?" Sophia laughed bitterly. "I was the only one who didn't panic. They were all standing there worrying about lawsuits while that little boy's heart was stopping." The phone in her pocket buzzed. Sophia froze. She pulled it out. It was the same number she had dialed earlier. Marcus Hale. She looked at Carl. "I have to take this." "Sophia, put the phone away," Carl warned. She ignored him and answered. "Hello?" "Sophia, it's Marcus Hale, Noah's father." His voice was different now. On the phone earlier it had been sharp, urgent. Now it was deep, calm, and resonant. It sounded like safety. "Mr. Hale," Sophia exhaled. "Is he okay? Is Noah okay?" "He's in the ICU, but he's going to make it," Marcus said. "He has type 1 diabetes. He went into ketoacidosis. If you hadn't called me, if you hadn't kept him awake and calm, the doctors say he might have slipped into a coma before the ambulance arrived. You saved his life." Sophia leaned against the metal shelving, tears finally spilling over. "I was so scared. He looked so small. I need to ask you something, Sophia," Marcus said. The tone shifted. It became precise. Noah told me he didn't drink water or use the bathroom because of a teacher. Mr. Henderson, were you in the hallway before he fainted? Did you see anything earlier in the day? Sophia hesitated. She looked at Carl, who was tapping his foot impatiently. If she spoke against the school, she was definitely fired. She was invisible. She was poor. She had no power here. But then she remembered Noah's hand in hers. She remembered the way the other adults had looked at him, like a broken object, not a child. Yes, Sophia whispered. I was cleaning the third-floor bathroom this morning. I heard Mr. Henderson yelling. He was in the hallway with Noah. Noah was begging to go inside. Henderson told him to stop acting like an infant and get back to class. He blocked the door, Mr. Hale. He physically stood in front of the restroom door. Silence on the other end. A silence so heavy it felt like the air pressure dropped. Thank you, Sophia, Marcus said. That's all I needed. Mr. Hale, Sophia added quickly. They are going to fire me for touching him, for calling you. Who is? The principal and my boss. Stay there, Marcus said. Don't leave the school. Don't sign anything. I'm coming back. You're coming back to the school? I have to pick up Noah's books, Marcus said, his voice devoid of emotion, which made it all the more terrifying. And I need to have a conversation with Mr. Sterling. The line went dead. Marcus walked out of the hospital into the cooling evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in bruises of purple and orange. He didn't go to his truck immediately. He stopped and took a deep breath. He was a warrior. He had been trained to destroy. But the world he lived in now didn't allow for destruction. He couldn't burn the school down. He couldn't assault the teacher. He had to be smarter. He had to be the protector Noah needed, not the monster his anger wanted him to be. He took out his phone and dialed another number. This one was to an old contact, a JAG officer, Judge Advocate General, he had served with, who now ran a high-powered civil rights firm in San Diego. Sarah, Marcus said when she answered. It's Marcus. I need a favor, a big one. I need you to meet me at St. Jude's Academy in 20 minutes. Marcus, is everything okay? No, Marcus said, climbing into his truck. My son was hospitalized because of negligence, and they are about to fire the witness who saved him. I need you to witness what happens next. I'm on my way, she said, no questions asked. The bond of the brotherhood and sisterhood ran deep. Marcus started the engine. The drive back to the school was different this time. He wasn't racing against death. He was driving toward justice. He thought about Sophia, the poor girl as society would label her, invisible, disposable. Yet she possessed the one quality that the expensive education at St. Jude's apparently couldn't teach: moral courage. Courage is not the absence of fear, Marcus thought, gripping the wheel. It is the ability to act in spite of it. Sophia had acted. Now it was his turn. He pulled up to the school gates. Old Man Miller was still there. He saw the truck and opened the gate, giving Marcus a confused look. Parents didn't usually come back at 5 p.m. Marcus parked in the same spot. The principal's reserved space. He got out, adjusting his jacket. He looked calm. He looked civilized. But inside, the wolf was pacing. He walked to the entrance where a woman in a sharp business suit was waiting for him. Sarah. She held a briefcase and looked ready for a fight. Lead the way, Commander, she said. Marcus nodded. He pushed open the doors of St. Jude's Academy. The silence of the school was about to be broken. The principal's office at St. Jude's Academy was designed to intimidate. It was a cavernous room paneled in dark walnut, lined with bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes that looked like they had never been opened. A large Persian rug dampened sound, making the room feel unnaturally quiet. In the center of the room sat Sophia Reyes. She was seated in a low wooden chair, while 3 men stood or sat in higher positions around her. It was a classic interrogation tactic, whether they realized they were using it or not. Behind the massive oak desk sat Principal Arthur Sterling. He was a man who wore expensive suits like armor, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. To his right stood Mr. Henderson, the teacher, looking less arrogant now and more defensive, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. To the left stood Carl, Sophia's supervisor from the cleaning agency, looking at the floor, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. "Ms. Reyes," Sterling said, his voice smooth and condescending, "we are not saying you had malicious intent. We are saying you demonstrated a lack of professional judgment." "I helped a child," Sophia said, her voice small but steady. She gripped her hands in her lap to stop them from shaking. "You touched a student without a witness present," Henderson interjected, his voice shrill. "You caused a scene in the hallway. You contacted a parent directly, bypassing the administration. Do you have any idea the legal exposure that creates for this institution?" "He was unconscious," Sophia argued, looking up. "He wasn't waking up." "And we have protocols for that," Sterling said, tapping a pen on his desk. "Protocols that do not involve the custodial staff playing doctor. Because of your panic, we now have a situation where the school's reputation is at risk. Parents talk, Ms. Reyes. Rumors spread." Sterling turned to Carl. "I'm afraid, Carl, that St. Jude's can no longer have Ms. Reyes on the premises. Her presence is disruptive. I expect her badge on my desk before she leaves." Carl sighed and looked at Sophia. "I'm sorry, kid. I told you. Rules are rules." Sophia felt the tears prickling her eyes. It wasn't just the job. It was the injustice. She had done the right thing. She knew she had. But in this room, right and wrong didn't matter. Only liability and image mattered. She reached into her pocket to take out her ID badge. Her hand trembled. She felt small, crushed by the weight of their authority. "I'll need you to sign this non-disclosure agreement as well." Sterling slid a paper across the desk. "It states that you will not discuss the events of today with anyone, including the press or social media, in exchange for your severance pay." Sophia looked at the paper. It was hush money. They wanted to buy her silence so no one would know a boy had almost died in their hallway. Before she could touch the paper, the heavy double doors of the office swung open. They didn't just open, they hit the stoppers with a dull thud that vibrated through the floor. Marcus Hale stepped in. He didn't look like a parent coming for a meeting. He looked like a storm front moving in. He was still wearing his work boots and jeans, but the air around him seemed to change pressure. Behind him walked a woman in a sharp gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Hale?" Sterling stood up, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We weren't expecting you back so soon. I assume you are here for Noah's belongings? We can have them brought to the front." "Sit down," Marcus said. It wasn't a shout. It was spoken at a conversational volume, but the command was absolute. Sterling blinked, stunned, and slowly lowered himself back into his chair. Marcus walked into the room. He didn't look at Sterling or Henderson. He walked straight to Sophia. He crouched down beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. The scary intensity in his face vanished for a split second. "Did you sign anything?" he asked softly. "No," Sophia whispered. "Good." Marcus stood up and turned to face the tribunal. He placed himself physically between Sophia and the men, a human shield. "Who is this?" Sterling demanded, gesturing to the woman beside Marcus. "My name is Sarah Jenkins," the woman said, stepping forward. "I am Mr. Hale's attorney, and I am here to ensure that every word spoken in this room from this point forward is on the record." She placed a small digital recorder on Sterling's desk and pressed record. A tiny red light blinked. The atmosphere in the room shifted from administrative scolding to legal war zone in the span of 3 seconds. Sterling cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Hale, this is highly irregular. We are currently dealing with a personnel matter regarding a third-party contractor. This doesn't concern you." "It concerns me," Marcus said, his voice low and grinding like tectonic plates. "Because the personnel matter saved my son's life while your highly paid staff watched him drop." Marcus pulled a chair over. He didn't sit in it. He spun it around and leaned his hands on the back of it, staring directly at Mr. Henderson. The teacher looked away, unable to hold the veteran's gaze. "Let's talk about protocols," Marcus began. "My son is in the ICU with diabetic ketoacidosis. His blood turned to acid because his body had no insulin. But that's a medical condition. That's bad luck. What isn't bad luck is the severe dehydration and the bladder retention that accelerated his condition into shock." Marcus paused. The silence was deafening. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus said. "Noah tells me he didn't drink water today. He didn't use the restroom. Why?" Henderson swallowed hard. I run a disciplined classroom, Mr. Hale. We prepare these young men for the Ivy League. We cannot have students wandering in and out every 5 minutes. It disrupts the flow of learning." "So you forbade him?" "I didn't forbid him," Henderson backpedaled, sweat visible on his upper lip. "I have a token system. Students get 3 tokens a week for breaks. Noah had used 2. I reminded him that if he used the 3rd one, he would miss the aquarium trip. I was teaching him resource management. Decision-making." "Decision-making," Marcus repeated the words, tasting the bitterness of them. "You asked an 8-year-old boy to choose between his health and a field trip. You leveraged his joy against his basic biological needs." "I didn't know he was sick," Henderson snapped. "If I had known he was diabetic, obviously exceptions would have been made. But you didn't look," Marcus said. "You saw a fidgety kid. You saw a disruption. You didn't see a child in distress. That is the difference between you and her." He pointed a thumb behind him at Sophia. "She saw him," Marcus continued. "She didn't know he was diabetic either. She just saw a human being in pain. She didn't check a rule book. She didn't count tokens. She acted." Sterling interjected, trying to regain control. "Mr. Hale, we are all relieved Noah is going to be okay. But that doesn't change the fact that Ms. Reyes violated security protocols by contacting you directly. We have a chain of command." "Your chain of command failed," Marcus said coldly. "If she had followed your chain, Mrs. Gable at the front desk would have called you. You would have come down. You would have debated whether to call an ambulance or parents first. You would have wasted 10, maybe 15 minutes. The doctors told me 15 minutes was the difference between recovery and permanent brain damage." Marcus leaned over the desk, his face inches from Sterling's. "Your chain of command was a noose around my son's neck. She cut it." Sterling flushed red. "Be that as it may, she is not an employee of St. Jude's. She is a contractor, and we have the right to terminate that contract for any reason." "Actually," Sarah, the lawyer, spoke up. Her voice was crisp and sharp. "That's not entirely true when the termination is retaliatory for a whistleblower action. By calling Mr. Hale, Ms. Reyes was effectively reporting a medical emergency that the school was failing to address. Firing her now looks an awful lot like punishment for exposing negligence." "Negligence?" Sterling scoffed. "That is a strong word. We have a witness," Marcus said. "Sophia saw Mr. Henderson physically block the restroom door earlier in the day. That's not classroom management. That is unlawful imprisonment and child endangerment." Henderson gasped. "That's a lie. I never—" "Are you calling her a liar?" Marcus turned to look at Sophia. "Sophia, look at him. Tell him what you saw." Sophia stood up. Her legs were shaky, but seeing Marcus fight for her gave her a surge of strength she had never felt before. She looked at the man who had ignored her for 3 years as she emptied his trash. "I saw you," she said, her voice trembling but clear. It was 10:15 a.m. outside the 3rd-floor boys' room. Noah was crying. You stood in front of the door and told him to stop manipulating the situation. You told him to go back to his desk and sit on his hands. The room went silent. The specificity of the detail, the time, the quote, was damning. Henderson crumbled. He slumped in his chair, burying his face in his hands. Marcus straightened up. He looked at Carl, the cleaning boss. "Carl, is it?" Marcus asked. "Yes, sir," Carl mumbled. "You were about to fire her. Why?" "Mr. Sterling told me to," Carl admitted, shrugging. "He said she was a liability." Marcus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A liability." Marcus shook his head. "Let me tell you what a liability is. A liability is a teacher who values order over life. A liability is a principal who cares more about a lawsuit than a student's safety." He walked over to Sophia and placed a hand on her shoulder. "This woman," Marcus said, his voice echoing in the room, "is earning minimum wage to clean up the messes these people make. She is invisible to you. You walk past her every day. You don't know her name. You don't look her in the eye. But today, when the chips were down, she was the only one with the character to lead." He turned back to Sterling. "In the Navy, we have a saying. The rank is on the collar, But the man is in the mud, meaning your title doesn't make you a leader. What you do in the dirt does. Today, Sophia was in the mud. You were in your office. What do you want, Mr. Hale? Sterling asked, his voice tired. He knew he had lost control of the narrative. You want Henderson fired? Done. He's gone. That's a start, Marcus said. But not enough. What else? Marcus looked at Sophia. He saw the frayed cuffs of her uniform. He saw the exhaustion in her eyes. The result of working 2 jobs, studying at night, trying to survive in a city that didn't care if she lived or died. I want you to rehire her, Marcus said. What? Sterling blinked. She works for the agency. No, Marcus said. I want you to hire her directly. St. Jude's staff. Full benefits, health insurance, pension, and a raise. She's not cleaning toilets anymore. You have an opening for a student aide, don't you? Someone to watch the kids during recess? Monitor the halls? We require a degree for that, Sterling stammered. She's in college, Marcus countered. I checked. She's studying early childhood education at City College. She's halfway through. She's qualified for an assistant role. Sophia looked at Marcus, her mouth open in shock. He had checked. He knew. Mr. Hale, that is highly unorthodox. Sarah, Marcus signaled his lawyer. Sarah opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick file. Mr. Sterling, this is a draft of a lawsuit for gross negligence, emotional distress, and endangerment. It names the school, you personally, and Mr. Henderson. If filed, this becomes public record. The local news loves stories about elite schools mistreating sick children. She placed the file on the desk. It landed with a heavy slap. However, Sarah continued, Mr. Hale is willing to settle this matter quietly. No press, no lawsuit. Provided you take immediate corrective action regarding staff training on medical emergencies, terminate Mr. Henderson, and offer Ms. Reyes a permanent position with the staff benefits package. Sterling looked at the file. He looked at Henderson, who was weeping silently. He looked at Marcus, whose face was set in stone. He knew when he was beaten. Fine, Sterling whispered. We will draft the offer letter tomorrow. Tonight, Marcus said. You have a printer. Do it now. 30 minutes later, Marcus and Sophia walked out of the front doors of St. Jude's Academy. The night air was crisp. The stars were out. Sophia was clutching a folder to her chest. Inside was an employment contract. Full-time assistant monitor. Dental, medical, tuition assistance for her classes. It was more money than she and her sister had ever seen. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to Marcus. Mr. Hale, she said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. You didn't have to do that. I'm nobody. Marcus stopped. He turned and looked at her. Under the amber glow of the streetlights, his rugged face softened. You are not nobody, Sophia, he said sternly. You are the person who saved my son. That makes you the most important person in the world to me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. This is my personal number. If they give you any trouble at all, you call me. Understand? Yes, sir. She wiped a tear from her cheek. Thank you. Don't thank me, Marcus said. Thank yourself. You stood up when everyone else sat down. That's rare. He walked toward his truck. Sophia watched him go. She felt different. The uniform she wore felt different. It was no longer a symbol of invisibility. It was just clothes. She was Sophia Reyes, and she had been seen. Marcus climbed into the cab of his truck. He didn't start the engine immediately. He gripped the wheel and let out a long, shuddering breath. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by exhaustion. He had won the battle at the school, but the war wasn't over. He still had to go back to the hospital. He still had to learn how to be a father to a son with a chronic illness. He still had to navigate the fear that would now live in the back of his mind every time Noah closed his eyes. But as he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw Sophia walking toward the bus stop, her head held high. Heroes don't always wear capes, Marcus thought. Sometimes they carry mops. He started the engine. He had a son to get back to. But just as he put the truck in gear, his phone rang again. He looked at the screen. Dr. Thorne, ICU. His heart stopped. Why was the doctor calling? He had just left. Was Noah okay? He answered on the first ring. Hale. Mr. Hale? Dr. Thorne's voice was serious. You need to come back to the hospital now. Is he? Noah is stable, she said quickly. But something has come up in his blood work. Something we didn't expect. It's not just diabetes, Marcus. The genetic markers, they are telling us a story we didn't anticipate. What are you saying? I'm saying, Dr. Thorne paused, that there are inconsistencies in his medical history, serious ones. We need to talk about Noah's biological mother. Marcus froze. Elena. His late wife. What about her? We can discuss it when you get here. Drive safe. The line went dead. Marcus stared at the phone. The relief of the last hour evaporated, replaced by a new creeping coldness. What could possibly be wrong with the history? Elena had died of lung failure. Noah was her son. They had a normal life. Or did they? Marcus gunned the engine, the tires screeching as he peeled out of the school parking lot. The night was far from over.